Many of us getting ready for winter, but some are getting ready even better. Marty, up north, I seen some pictures on your Twitter. You got some meat happening going into freezers. What have I seen?
Yeah.
I haven't seen you in 2 weeks. What have you been up to?
Yeah, no, it's my annual tradition. I've been doing this for 30 years plus. And to the viewers, right? Just real quickly, my moniker Marty up north comes from the fact that I grew up and was a young adult in northern Alberta. So I spent the majority of my life living in northern Alberta in small communities like Edson, Fox Creek, Grand Prairie, and I hunt. And some of my best friends are hunters, and it's an annual tradition of mine. Every year I head up north towards the Grand Cache area on a trip called the He-Man trip. And people say, where'd the He-Man trip come from? It's the Little Rascals, Alfalfa, the He-Man Women Haters Club. So we have a club of men who get together to go hunt. And our wives always thought, you're just going there to have fun. Sure, we go there to have fun, but if you show the picture real quick, I usually produce. So that's this year's harvest. About 7 days ago, I shot this big bad boy. A classic hunt for me, very classic hunt. You get up in the morning, you take an ATV to your favorite spot, and then I walk into my favorite meadow. I have a meadow, and I saw this big boy 2 days in a row. Didn't have a shot on him, took a day off, and then on the fourth day walked in very slowly in the morning, and he was standing there, and unfortunately now for him, he's in my freezer. And that's, for your viewers, that's 2 quarters. So in the field, we will gut the animal, skin the animal, and then quarter it to make it easier to transport. Each one of those pieces is about 250 pounds with the bone in. And then when I'm done butchering, if you slide down or up or down, I think down, I showed right there. You had it.
Oh, up here. So you've got your
right there. One of those pictures shows, the bottom left picture shows little packs. We end up packaging in 2 to 3 pound packs, and we end up with about 100 packs. So if you think about it, that's 100 packs is 2 a week for an entire year. And so it's an Alberta thing. It's a thing I do. I love to hunt and garden and live off the grid. I'm not entirely off the grid, but like to be independent. And I always say it's guys like me that the Trudeau doesn't like.
Yeah, no, absolutely. They don't like people to be independent. They want dependency, and they want you to need their vote, and that's what they want. With handouts and all kinds of stuff like that. You've told me before that you actually work less so you don't have to pay Trudeau. You just forget it.
Yeah, it's a decision I took during COVID, affected like many people. I didn't want to get vaccinated. At first it was purely a risk assessment. I did the risk assessment. I concluded that COVID wasn't that dangerous, and I didn't know anything about this vaccine. So I'm like, I'm not getting vaccinated. And it didn't affect me at work. But then when they started saying, you needed to get to work, I'm like, whatever, screw you. Then I'm not going to work. Luckily, I was in that position where I didn't have to. Mm-hmm. And so I'm a consultant. I only took on the work where I could do the work without getting vaccinated. And then it radically reduced my income, but I got used to it. And now I do it on purposely. I don't want to work and pay too much and just to pay taxes. So I keep my income below what I call a taxable level. I live well below what I used to, but I'm happy doing it. And if Trudeau quits, I'll perhaps pick up more work, but I refuse to pay a whole ton of taxes to have them wasted. So
yeah. Well, no kidding. Well, they're going to waste it whether or not you pay into it now. You'll be paying it later in the loans that we're all going to have to pay back, and that's the reality of the situation in Canada. But hey, getting back to you being out in the woods, a lot of people were concerned because there was an attack, a Grizzly attack that took place. In fact, when that happened, I went right to your Twitter page. And I was like, is there going to be anything? And I saw that you had a grizzly, a photo of a grizzly. And I'm like, no, Marty, you all right?
Yeah, no, so a couple of things. So when I'm gone, where I go, we have no communications, but every other day in my travels, I can get up to a higher hill, and I can stop, take a break for a few minutes on that hill, and receive a few texts. And you're not the only one. I got a couple of texts. But generally speaking, I hear about all the news when I come back. So when I come back here, I heard about this very nasty, unfortunate Grizzly attack. It happened very close to where I live, actually. It happened in a place called Yahatinda, on the very eastern boundary of Banff National Park. Yahatinda is like it's a government ranch. And two experienced hikers were attacked by an old grizzly sow, and they were killed. Somebody survived the initial attack because they were able to send out an SOS on one of their emergency satellite device. So obviously somebody survived, but when they got there, they found 2 victims, including their dog. And then I tweeted almost separately, unbeknownst to me about that. I did tweet that picture of a grizzly because I saw 2 grizzlies this week while I was hunting. And then in a separate comment, I made a comment that there's too many of them. So here in Alberta, and I think it's the same thing in BC, we outlawed grizzly hunting probably 25 years ago because the population was in decline. And my comment last week was, man, we need to bring back some temporary hunting at least for a few years, and either to call the size of the herd a little bit, or just to get the fear get grizzlies to fear humans again. Because the grizzly we saw on the trail, we tried to get him to move off the trail. We literally fired 5 shots over his head and he didn't even move. So,
wow.
And that's back to a theme of mine. It's people say, why would you kill the grizzlies? I'm like, well, just putting pressure on them is important. It's a way to rebalance the ecosystem. It's also a renewable resource. People keep bringing up these things about renewable resource. Well, if we kill and eat, I don't know if I'd eat a grizzly, but if we kill it, I don't think so. But, we could get money for the harvest. The government can make a few bucks. It's a complicated issue, and it's an emotional issue. But at the end of the day, as an outdoorsman, I see firsthand many times these effects of these mismanagement things. And I think that the grizzly population right now, you're going to hear more and more about incidents and accidents. And what's going to happen is, behind the scenes, Parks Canada and conservation officers are going to kill grizzlies. And it is what it is. And so it's just one of the well, it ties into a couple of other things that I wanted to talk about.
Well, today. I was going to add to that. This is a problem up in northern Canada as well with the polar bears. The polar bears are in such great numbers now, and it's because of efforts that we had for conservation. And now people still think that the polar bears are dying. No, they're in record numbers at this point, and they've become a nuisance actually for the locals up there, because they are the largest carnivorous animal in the food chain, and are on land anyway, and they're of grave danger to the locals because they'll come in and eat people. That's the thing that they do.
Absolutely. But the topic I want to talk about is, I'll relate it to the moose. So I shot the moose. The moose is down. I know that. Then I walked back to my camp to go get help. I got hunting buddies. Now we got a lot of work. So, I leave that moose unattended for about 2 hours by the time I get back to camp and come back. And as I'm walking back to camp, I'm walking back to the moose. I'm walking super cautious at this point because a grizzly could be on that kill. And I'm armed. Sure, I got a firearm, but I sure like to be able to carry one of my handguns while I'm hunting as protection, or while I'm out working as protection. And I'm not allowed to do that in this country. Like I can own a handgun, but I can't use it other than to go to for target sport. And I can think of some very valid reasons why I would want to have a handgun on me while I'm hunting, which I think is brings up to one of the big stories that happened this week. The Trudeau Liberals what did they call it? They extended the handgun
Well, they're calling it an amnesty, yeah,
yeah,
online.
yeah. Yeah, and so what the Trudeau Liberals did, actually, I shouldn't even say what the Trudeau Liberals did. What Justin Trudeau did is he banned a whole class of firearms in one full sweep 3 years ago with an order in council. You know, he did it during COVID. He didn't do it through votes in the House of Commons or anything like that. He just banned firearms without really thinking about how that was going to work. And they've been thinking about this for 3 years of how do they get him out of the hands of citizens. And today they announced that they're extending that ban without knowing what's going to happen next for another 2 years, which is basically telling Canadians they don't know what they're doing. They have no idea what.
No, they don't know what they're doing.
No.
And with their Bill C-21, there were it was to ban handguns essentially. That's the main point of it. And the amendment that they brought in, I think it was like 48 pages for the initial bill, and then they come in with like hundreds of pages more, and they ban essentially anything that's center fire and then more other things on an arbitrary
and you
list.
mentioned the polar bear and the way up north. I mean, the Inuit and the First Nation communities up north are going to be dramatically affected by that, because one of their favorite rifles is mass-produced Lee Enfields that were like, you know, a common firearm for Canadian soldiers in the last 2 wars. We have 6 million of them, and we gave them to the natives, and they love them because they're reliable, they're easy. But the ban was going to make those things illegal. So then the government said, "Oh,
because they called them weapons of war, correct?
Well, we'll ban them for everybody except the natives." And
yeah, that's not right. I mean, I thought we were supposed to get rid of laws that are subject to only particular races and things like that. It's not good at all. And those guns, I mean, they're trying to say that they're weapons of war because they were used in a war, but any one of them that came back, they were sporterized when they first got back, right? Is that?
Well, it's always happened. I mean, you know, wars create advances in technology. So firearms is one. But after every war in the last 3 centuries, no matter what, humans who've returned home after their wars have taken home their firearms from the war because they become familiar with it. So my great grandfather who came home from World War I would have used his Lee Enfield. My grandfather who came back from World War II would have used whatever. And your mom and my cousin who comes back from Afghanistan is used to his AR-15. They're just, you know, it is what it is. It's what we're familiar with. It's a new advancement in the technology. It's more precise. It's safer, and it's what the guys want to use. And suddenly, the government here wanted to ban them. It's an example of something that we've talked so many times. It's coming up with a solution that is the wrong solution to the wrong problem. And firearms owned by law-abiding citizens are not the problem in this country. The homicides, you know, the government's own website shows it. Maybe we'll talk about that next week because the data was released recently. But there's like 4 out of 200 homicides in Canada last year committed by firearms that were registered to someone. Like it's not the problem. It's not the problem.
No.
But yeah.
Well, I wanted to, I'm thinking solutions to problems. Yeah. I had some problems this week. I did a video on Tuesday after the events of what happened, of course, in Israel over the weekend. And this was at the end of Yom Kippur. And I think it's 50 years and 1 day after the war, or the battle of Yom Kippur. And well, obviously, I mean, everybody who's listening to this at this point knows of what happened. There was a massive coordinated attack that took place, and people from Hamas in Palestine jumped the border, crossed the border through different means. There was bulldozers that took out the borders in some areas. Some people were parachuted in. And they went in and they killed civilians, women, children, men, but unarmed civilians, and it was a tragedy. It was absolutely horrible what happened. But then the subsequent aftermath is where things get really messy. And now I did a video talking about this, and my main purpose of the video is I knew that a lot of people were going to be covering this, and I didn't need to really add that much to this story, but I wanted to talk about a Canadian perspective and what was happening in Canada. There were people celebrating in the streets, celebrating what had occurred. And I took a knee-jerk reaction to that.
I know you're going to let me just mention one quick thing. Yeah, I've been gone I was gone for a week, and when I'm gone for that week without communication, I'm always nervous about what I'm going to find when I get back to Canada. Coming back and learning about the attacks in Israel was one thing. Coming back and seeing that there was people almost celebrating it in this country was tough to take.
Well, it was more than celebrating it. There were people actually justifying it. I showed a video from Edmonton actually, and it was a large group and a man on the speaker speaking to the audience, and he was saying that because every man and woman in Israel is conscripted into service for a length of time, they're all somehow reservists, so they're all fair game. Like, this is the kind of justification that you get when people are demonized. And what's really sad is people are being demonized on both sides, right? From each side. So, the occupation in Israel and what's going on, many people pointing out it's unfair. If you look at what's happened throughout history, and just the number of casualties on the other side is insane. Yeah. It's absolutely insane. But that wasn't the point of my video. The point of my video wasn't to take a side, and I actually say that at the end of the video. Many people didn't stick around to the end for whatever reason, and espoused what my opinions were afterwards. But it was that Canada should remain neutral in this whole thing. And my point was, I don't want that hate coming here. I don't want to see that stuff in our streets in Canada. We're largely a nation whose role has been peacekeeping, and this is not peacekeeping.
That's what we used to be known. In fact, you bring up a bunch of points. I mean, first of all, that Middle East situation is complicated, right? You and I, it's so complicated. It's brutally complicated. But Canada over the years has always sent peacekeepers in there. It's incredible how many years we've had to send peacekeepers in Egypt and in the Gaza and all that part of the world. So yes, I agree. That's the role that Canada should be playing. And like you said, I don't want that shit here. That in fact, I tweeted about the fact that this is crazy because 3 weeks ago we had these beautiful march for a 1 million person march where people set aside those differences, right?
Absolutely.
Here in Calgary, it was an interesting alliance. I mean, suddenly I went to a multicultural march, and we had Muslims and Christians and Italians and Canadians and Africans, and we put aside all our differences, and we were, well, I guess we still had sort of an enemy in a sense, which is the state trying to control our children.
Yeah.
But generally speaking, I can say that we came together for some really nice reasons. And then suddenly 3 weeks later, people who were marching side by side are now again on opposite sides of the street for something that's happening 5,000 miles away. Holy smokes. Yeah,
and this is a conflict that's 2,000 years old, and I quite literally don't have a dog in this fight. It's a claim stake on land for religious reasons, and I don't know where it should end, and I don't make any claims on where it should end or who deserves what and whatnot. What I do see though is demonization happening on both sides. We saw a lot of people criticizing Ben Shapiro at the moment because he came out blazing in his rhetoric in this whole thing. It's you're either with us or you're against us kind of thing. There's no neutral parties. that sort of rhetoric. And
Ben's got a dog in the race, though, or what's your expression? I mean, he wears the little hat, and I think Ben is Jewish, right? So
yes,
he's probably, for him, it's probably a little more emotional than for you and I.
Yeah, this one was the most surprising for me. Dave Rubin, usually quite peacenik, that sort of dude. He says when Israel bombs the F out of Gaza, which it should for however long it takes, remember that Egypt, which shares a border with Gaza, won't let one Palestinian in. Actually, they've bombed the border and flooded the tunnels to keep Palestinian brothers out. So almost like an advocate for the complete annihilation of this area and all the people that can't escape. I mean, what are they going to do? Swim, get out of there? I don't want to see this stuff, and I don't want to be on this side of it either, right? So I'm not taking a side on this conflict at all. And this is what, people were laying claim, like, Clyde, you're taking this side or you're taking that side. I'm not taking either side. I don't. I was raised Christian, and I'm largely agnostic, so I don't believe in claims to particular land because of religious reasons. Other people can have opinions on that, and that's their prerogative. I live all the way over in Canada, and I'm worried about what's happening in Canada and on the streets of Canada.
And when you mention something like this, there's a little bit of me that goes, again, are we being played, right? Because you're now describing something that worries me, which is you have people that are with you that have been with you, that have been your fans forever and ever, and suddenly on an issue, somebody found an issue that managed to divide your fans. And not, sort of talking broadly, but this is just another example. Like that's what I hate. I hate when our Canadian leadership takes issues like this and use them to continue to divide ourselves. So I don't know how we end this one. Let's end it on a funny part. Let's end it on something funny. Canada's response to this should have been, Canada's response to this was miserable. I mean, in the past, when there was conflicts like this, we'd send planes over there. We would not ask questions. Temporary visas, forget it. We stamp them, rubber stamp, get on the plane, come on over, and get out of the harm's way. During this week, Canadian embassies were closed because it was Thanksgiving. We're having a hard time getting planes over there. And then I want to end it on the funniest thing of all. We have Minister Jolie, the Foreign Affairs Minister, doing a press conference dressed like explain this to me. Please explain this to me, Clyde. Explain this to me. She mentioned this.
She looks like she's joined a Communist Party.
Before we go into that, her comments were the most bizarre things I've ever heard. She basically said, this opens up two fronts for us. No. She said it. If you listen to her comments, I'm like, I have no idea what she's saying. Maybe it's lost in translation because she's fundamentally French, but she's like, we have a front in Ukraine and now we have a front in Israel. I'm like, so we're in this fight and we're on two fronts now. I don't understand it. I'll have to dissect that, but I'm also wondering why she's dressed like that. I mean, she looks to me like a Maoist communist. She cut her hair to look unisex. She's got less makeup and she's got the green. Is she being handled by the Chinese right now?
Well, it's funny because it reminded me of an anime, and I'm into Japanese stuff, and I know this anime character, and her name just looks so much like her, actually, and her name is actually Tanya the Evil, because she's a character that is a complete tyrant. She rises to power, and basically she's like an alternate universe version of Hitler.
there you go.
And the fact that she looks just like her really pulled me back on that one. But yeah, no, it's interesting that you bring up that point, the whole two fronts thing. And I know we're going to move past this, but I wanted to mention this because this is really, and this is where things can turn into World War III, right?
Quickly.
The news media immediately is calling, they've stopped calling it Hamas terrorism. Even the CBC sent out a memo not to call it terrorist organization. But I've noticed what they've been saying on their video publications is Iran backed Hamas. Iran backed Hamas.
Right.
Repeat, rinse, repeat. And that's the thing. And I know that, you know, the neocons in the United States, they're famous for warmongering, have been pushing, and you know, the left does it too. So the neoliberals, I guess, the establishment have been pushing to get into Iran as a military conflict for some time, and it looks like they're pushing again. And this is a thing that they want to do. Now, the justification that it looks like they're trying to get here is that Iran backed this attack on Israel because Israel's an ally. If they back the attack financially, then this is an act of war. Now, this could go somewhere horribly because, full circle, if that takes place, it would be, you know, Vladimir Putin could turn around and say, well, Canada has been backing Ukraine. Can I declare war against them?
In fact, when Jolie makes that statement that, you know, we now have a second front, I think what she meant to say is we now have a second proxy war. Because to me, you know, Ukraine is a proxy war one way or another between Russia and the US, and now we're going to see that this Israel has also been a proxy war between, you know, it's a testing ground for weapons. It's so complicated. So I think, and so we're now fighting two proxy wars instead of just one, and that could quickly, dangerously escalate into something worse.
I'm really concerned about it, and I don't want to see our country go in that direction. We shouldn't be meddling in foreign affairs. We should really be peacekeepers and stick to that role.
And to your viewers who misunderstood your video or whatever, Clyde's not taking a side. I'm not taking a side, and we're telling everybody, don't fall for this. Don't take a side quickly. Try and, you know, something here smells fishy, and are we being played? So be very careful. You know, that's my advice to people.
Absolutely. And well, other things that are being played right now are things like the.
Because remember, they want to distract us, right? They want to distract us. It's always the same thing. While I was gone, I noticed there was a small market correction. There's a bubble crash that's happening in the housing market, or right around the corner. The Liberals were challenged to. Oh, actually, we should talk about that, because, you know, the Liberals were challenged. Somebody passed a motion to repeal the carbon tax. And there was a vote on it in the House of Commons, and the Liberals voted against that motion, which is rare. So, you know, the Liberals are crumbling.
Get into that.
Get into that. Ton of distractions.
So who was this? You said to me earlier this was a Newfoundland MP on the Liberal side, and he.
Yeah. Newfoundland's all Liberal MPs, you know, Seamus O'Regan and that neighborhood. But this, I think his name is Ken McDonald, if I remember correctly, an older gentleman. Listen to him. He's got an interview. He was interviewed on Power and Politics. But basically, in a nutshell, he's an MP who's doing his job. He says, listen, I travel on Newfoundland, and the carbon tax in Newfoundland, I hear it over and over and over and over. It's hurting people because Newfoundland, he says very eloquently in the interview, Newfoundland depends almost entirely on everything being transported to the island by boat or by, no, not depends. Almost everything on the island comes by boat.
Yeah, right? And they're not sailboats.
They only have a little bit of local resources that they supply themselves, but everything else comes from somewhere else.
Yeah.
And so fuel for them is how they heat their homes. Fuel. So he mentioned that over and over, and he says his constituents are telling him all the time that the carbon tax is hurting. And he said, I have to vote the will of my constituents, and I'm voting against this carbon tax at this point. Yeah. And then he went on eloquently further to talk about, he criticized Guilbeault. So he mentioned other things that he's opposed to. You know, Guilbeault, you and I talked about this a few weeks ago. Guilbeault is promoting heat pumps. And this gentleman perfectly said, heat pumps won't work in Newfoundland. It's too cold and the homes are too old. So retrofitting an old home in Newfoundland with a modern heat pump won't do anything. So I just want more Liberals more MPs to vote with the wishes of their constituents. And this is another example of, he says actually in the interview, if there was a vote tomorrow, he thinks that the Liberals would lose. So it'll be interesting to see how he gets reprimanded by Trudeau, because he's very blunt. He's a newfie. He's a great newfie. He's a he's blunt and he's telling it the way it is. And back to what I was saying earlier, the government wants all sorts of distractions right now. Nothing's going good for Trudeau, so every distraction
is a warm
good
welcome.
One.
Yeah.
Absolutely. He'll take a side on this on the war in Israel. He'll take a side.
Well,
and if it creates divisions, he doesn't care.
They all did. Yeah. I mean, so we all know that our governments all support Israel 100%, and whether that's justified or not, I mean, that's not my purview in this video to talk about. But that's their position, and they have had that position for a long time. And but Trudeau did do the right thing, and he came out and denounced all of the protests that were cheering on the act of terrorism. That's terrible. And he came out on the right side with that one, in my opinion.
Yeah, and now I'm going to play. I'm still going to harp on Trudeau. I don't give him a pass. I mean, Jordan Peterson almost said that Trudeau was believable. And sure, he's believable, but I'm also going to say, you know what? You'll come talk to those protesters, but you wouldn't come talk to truckers in Ottawa 2 weeks, for a couple of days a year ago. So, God. That's another subject. What happened while I was gone? How's the Tamara Litch and Chris Barber trial going? Any word on that?
Well, they adjourned for I think a week, and then they've just come back today. So this is the first day back, and it's not really gone very far. I know that they were trying to call in witnesses they were going to make a decision on whether or not they're going to allow for witnesses from the city of Ottawa, and of course, they're. the prosecuting attorney is going to grab the most dynamic witnesses and try to paint a picture about Tamara and Chris that maybe never ever met with Tamara or Chris. It's all about the convoy writ large. The defense said, well, they've already acknowledged that there were some crimes or some laws broken during the convoy, but it's not like they were advocating for that, and it's not their responsibility on the whole for every individual that may have committed crimes. They didn't themselves, and they didn't consult with anyone to commit crimes. So they're hoping to keep those witnesses out of the case. That's where
so it's still went. A bit of a. Yeah, so it's still a bit of a gong show then. It's not, this was supposed to last 16 days. I think it's past the 16 days, and it doesn't sound like it's getting resolved soon.
No,
in terms of that.
It looks like it's going to go into November.
Yeah, I'm waiting for the judge to throw that one out. I'll look into this one this week, but I'm waiting for the judge to finally say enough is enough and throw it out.
Yeah, because it's costing
my wife was coming.
It's costing money, right? So it's costing Tamara, it's costing Chris a tremendous amount of money, and they're dragging it out. Like they've called this before, lawfare, the practice of just dragging it out and incurring you massive financial burdens because of their moves in this case, and that's where I kind of see.
Crazy. I mean, weirdly back to guns, but if I were to shoot a grizzly in self-defense in this country, I'd probably face a $6,000 fine, and the book would be thrown at me, and it would be ruthless. If you're Tamara Litch and you defy the government, they will throw the book at you, and it'll be ruthless. But if you commit an act of terrorism in the streets somewhere, the government lets you go. So it's more
there's political bias, let's just say, in the justice system, and who they hold to account for what was committed. And it's terrible. I mean, we don't hear about any long court battles for statues of our founding members of Parliament being pulled down, right? So this is I agree with you on that one.
Hey, while we're talking, I don't know, hate to put you on the spot, but when you were talking about Danielle Smith yesterday, maybe somebody it's been 1 year. It's been 1 year, so that video is just an older video of Danielle that resurfaced, but it's valid. I think it's timely. I'm glad that video showed up.
Absolutely. I got myself caught on that one. So what happens is there'll be a lot of reposters on Twitter, And I saw it, and it said today's date, and I was like, oh, okay, this is a new one. I hadn't seen it before, but I saw the other one that I also put in the video that was from 2022.
Yeah.
And
I
put that out, and then
it's been a
yeah, I put that out, and then I put some more recent stories along with it. So it is some most of it's relevant today, but yeah, it had been a year since that one went out.
And for me, I'm happy. It's been a wonderful year with Danielle as our premier. She's laying low right now, and we talked about this before. I don't think, just like Pierre Poilievre's laying a little bit low. Nobody needs to do anything rash right now. Let Trudeau keeps his self-destruction. Let's keep an eye on the ball. Let's watch. Let's realize when we're being played and people are trying to divide us. I think the country's turning a corner, and if we stay, actually, now you just reminded me. I lost a bet while I was gone, didn't I? Trudeau didn't resign.
No, he didn't resign. He didn't resign.
I made that bold prediction before I went on my trip that Trudeau was going to resign. What's today? I said he'd resign on October 6th. But I lost a bet.
But the hot potato will be passed to him real soon again, because we're looking at a housing market crash. This is really, really bad. We have websites like Better Dwelling. Showcased this in my last video. Canada heard 2 real estate narratives from the Bank of Canada, but data only supports one, showing that the bonds market and everything is about to pop as well, and that's really bad news.
You'll put a link to that one in the bottom.
Oh yeah, of course.
Yeah, I want to read that one. That looks interesting.
Yeah, and then also this week's top stories: Canadian real estate prices may drop 30%. Housing investment drops 80s bubble style. This is what they're predicting, and there's massive drops already in the market. Some places like Ontario already at I think there was numbers as far as 35% earlier this year. But this is the direction that it's going. And a lot of Canadians are wondering what they're going to do in this scenario. Now, I shared an interesting perspective from.
It's good news and bad news depending on which camp you're in. It's bad news if your house is already paid for. It's good news if, it's bad news if
you owe money on your house.
If you owe money on your house, it's good news if you're looking for a new house and got a few bucks and waiting to invest. So,
and right now, people who are renters are in limbo, and this is a really interesting story that came about. I'm a renter, and I was really concerned about, what might happen. But a friend of mine who's got 4 kids at home, also a renter, hasn't lost it yet, but got a call from his landlord saying, "Yeah, I'm going to sell the house." And there are no rentals available, and rentals are extraordinarily expensive in the town that I live in. They've jumped up. We're looking at a 3-bedroom townhouse for at minimum $4,000 a month to rent, and not a lot of vacancies, not a lot. And
do you think your friend's rental is going to be sold, and he might be able to stay as a renter in the new owners, or?
Well, here's the thing. So he's got an arrangement where he doesn't have to leave until the house has been sold.
Yeah.
And he gets 2 months notice for that. Now, that being said, if the owner would have put it up 6 months ago, it would have been sold overnight. Now houses are sitting on the market, which is
already really.
Yeah. So even in where I live, the neighborhood that I live in.
I'm not surprised. I shouldn't be surprised. No. I mean, this is predictable. This is the cycle. This is how it's designed to work, right? Well, no, we shouldn't have gotten here, but this is predictable. We borrowed too much money. We spent beyond our means. We printed too much money. The Bank of Canada had to increase interest rates. We didn't build houses. We let too many immigrants in, blah, blah, blah. I mean, this is the trajectory is perfectly predictable. To me, it is anyways.
Absolutely. And what people are seeing right now, what people are seeing is that the housing prices are coming down. So nobody wants to buy at the top of market. And when all of the signs are leaning towards this market's going to pop, it's kind of, you're left holding the bag time if you're in that market. Yeah. So, my assumption is his landlord, has a bunch of debt and he wants to consolidate, get out of it as much as possible and liquidate his assets before any crash. But I think we're almost at the point where it's too late. depending on what kind of property you're holding. So if you're holding a townhouse, that might be, those are the houses that are staying on the market for the most part. Some actual homes are moving, but it's slowing down at this point. So there's less purchases. The real estate agents are freaking out in British Columbia, pressing on the premier of the province. So last time they were going to raise the rates back earlier in September, they had all this pressure to not do it. Everything was in the direction of they should raise the rates, and they were going to. And my prediction was 50 basis points, so 0.5%, up to a percent. And now in a few weeks, we're going to be finding out if they're going to raise the interest rates. And
yeah, it skips a month, right? The last one, the last rate increase was September 6th. There wasn't one on October 6th. There'll be one in a month from now. Yeah. Yeah, I'm with you. I mean, they towed the line last month, but they're going to increase it again. You're reminding me of another topic. We're running out of time. I know you don't want to keep these shows going on forever and ever, but
we can go for another 5 minutes. Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah, the NDP won in Manitoba.
Yeah, that was surprising. Like, that was absolutely surprising. I guess they ran on this idea of pushing forward and digging up some landfills to try to find anyone who's been buried in the landfills. The Conservatives said this is a waste of money and time. What are we doing? But it tugged on enough heartstrings, and that vote went right over to the NDP. That's kind of what I saw from the situation. Tell me if I got that wrong.
No, I think that's how it is. But ironically, the people who should be most concerned about that is the native population, and they didn't vote for the NDP. In fact, the ones who voted for the NDP are the city dwellers in Winnipeg who soaked that up. I mean, that's it came down to a couple of issues. That's one of the issues, and ultimately it also comes down to rural versus urban divide, and we came close in Alberta to that divide here. If the in the future, when the cities get bigger, it's going to become increasingly difficult to have a conservative province, even in Alberta.
So what are your predictions though for this? Because Alberta had NDP, and they had a lot of money and resources for the NDP to soak up like a big sponge, right? And that's essentially what they did. The unemployment rose tremendously compared to the jobs that they created in government. I mean, they created a lot of jobs to offset all the jobs that they destroyed in the economy.
Alberta is a conservative province, and the NDP coming into power in 2015 was just an anomaly. It was three big things happened. I mean, sorry, just before the last conservative government, was Jim Prentice, and Jim Prentice became unpopular, told Albertans look in the mirror, because we were telling him you need to cut money and so forth. So we had a conservative premier that pissed us off. And then he took a chance, and he went into an early election, and it just backfired on him. People voted NDP. But then the other thing that was happening is in 2014, we had a major crash in the price of oil. So it was just the right moment, and it was an anomaly, and Alberta elected an NDP government. We learned quickly they made a mess of everything, and Albertans, rejected the NDP ideology. Ultimately, I think we'll stay conservative. I am worried about the big cities like Edmonton, but it is what it is. Alberta is fundamentally conservative, and now we're ultra conservative because the price of oil is back high. Everything's working. Everybody's happy. Everybody wants to work, and all our government needs to do here is just progress us forward slowly. So we're happy with slow forward progress is Alberta.
So what do you think will happen in Manitoba now under NDP government now that they're in?
Manitoba is an economic basket case. It's been an economic basket case. So they just go back and forth. I mean, they had Pallister during COVID. I mean, they had a brutal premier, and then they replaced him with somebody who was equally bad. They're just all over the place. And to me, Manitoba is an economic basket case. It's in the middle of the country. I consider it an eastern province. Whenever I talk about separation and people go, "Hey, bring us on board Manitoba," my answer is always hell no. If there's a western separation, it's Saskatchewan and Alberta and northern BC and no Manitoba. Like
northern BC, you're gonna leave me hanging. You're gonna leave me hanging.
You can move, buddy. You can move because you're welcome here. But when people say, "Should we take a little bit of northern Manitoba just to have access to Tidewater?" I'm like, no, we'll do that through northern BC. We'll take Fort St. John, and we'll take Dawson Creek, maybe Prince George and Prince Rupert. We're good enough that's all we need. We just need a corridor.
I know British. I know it on a funny. Well, I know British Columbia, and I know the region I live in. I'm not in the Lower Mainland. I'm just north of that. But as soon as you get south of Horseshoe Bay, everything changes. Believe me. I mean, you've got little pockets in towns that are very lefty, but for the most part, people are not clamoring for the NDP or the Liberals. In fact, they complain more about them than anything.
Actually, another thing that happened last week that most of you viewers wouldn't be aware is there were some by-elections in Quebec, provincial by-elections in Quebec, and the Parti Québécois, which is a very separatist party that's been around forever and ever, is regaining seats. So Quebec is shifting again. So every province shifts, right? And some shift, a little bit between. So like when I say Alberta shifts a little bit to the right, a little bit to the left, but generally stays to the right. Manitoba stays to the left. If I think of BC, you guys are to the left. And then Quebec is far left. And then shifts to separatism. And so the separatist movement in Quebec is regaining momentum. I spent the last 2 days tweeting nonstop in French with Quebecers. And if anybody's following your show from Quebec, I'm on your side, guys. Go ahead and separate. Like I'll help the separatists. Like I'm not the enemy here. I was just bringing up flaws in your strategy, but otherwise I'm all in favor. God, we live in interesting times.
We do, absolutely. We absolutely do. Yeah, they could take their debt with them too if they do leave. I would be happy to see that.
The whole other topic. Yeah, right on.
Yeah, maybe we'll hit that up another time. But hey, Marty, where can people find you?
Marty Up North on Twitter, on YouTube. Put up a new YouTube video a week ago. Finally, I'm catching up, and but yeah, I'm a shit disturber on YouTube or on Twitter, kind of like you here.
yeah, I've been doing.
We gotta speak the truth, man, and then some people get upset, but and sometimes we get upset, but that's it is what it is. Free speech, and let's talk. I'm just happy we're talking.
Absolutely. Well, yeah, everybody.
Awesome.
Thanks for joining, and as always, keep on trucking.